Okay, so we learned right at the end of yesterday, can a Shchivmer say Tanu halva osila ployim? So the Gemara says, even though if a bori sells a choiv, and we're talking about a milval peh, even if a bori sells a choiv, he could still be moichelet. It doesn't work, but a Shchivmer can do it. And we had two reasons. One reason we had was a papa is because hoil the yerish yorisha. That's a very big chiddush in Hilchos Shchivmera, because that tells us that Shchivmera as Dr. Rashbam isn't a matana. It's not like a matana, but instead of a kinyan, you just say it like amirasa legvoikim siras lehedjit. You don't say that. Rather, it works b'Torah Yerusha, and a yerish, of course, yarshin zachayiv in ganzen. So a Shchivmera will receive it just like Yerusha. So that's a huge chiddush, because we're saying that matna Shchivmera might take on certain properties of Yerusha, and therefore you could transfer a choiv through a matna shchivmera that you wouldn't be able to transfer with a matana. And then, of course, Rav Ravika said, halva is also isa bebari because of the halacha of mamit shloshton, where it's koinen gantin to the fact that a malva can no longer be moichel. So iboyelahu. The Gemara clears now a shayla. We're about 7 or 8 lines from the top of Kuf Mem Chesem Harav. Deko la'echad u'peiroisav la'ach. So the Shchivmera said, I want the dekel to go to Moshe, and I want the payers to go to Aaron. Now, I said Shchivmera, but that's not so posh that we're speaking about a Shchivmera. So Rashbam says, is the mukmi lo bebori? There are those who say the shaila is related to a bori, but the Rashbam doesn't like that. The Rashbam says it has to be a Shchivmera, and we'll see in a second. First, let's look at the shaila, and then we'll go back. Dekel la'echad u'peiroisav la'ach. I want my dekel to go to Reuven and my payers to go to Shimon. Mahu, mi shire makam peri. Do you say that after he already gave the dekel to Reuven, he's still retaining for himself the payers, and therefore he can still give it to Shimon? Or shire, or he can't. Now, Zokter Rashbam, if the shaila is by a matnas buri, and the shaila merely is he shire la'atzmei the peri, so that therefore he could now give it to a second person, what in the world is that shaila doing here in Maseches Avos from Perek Mishaves? It's a whole shaila of Dekal Parosav. That's where it should be. Therefore, Dr. Ashbam, we're not speaking about a matnas buri. We're talking about a matnas chivmera. And this, I'm sorry, we've had this case. Yeah, we've had a case in other places about, and Dr. Ashbam, maybe it should have been discussed there. Why is it being discussed smack in the middle of the sugya of chivmera? That is the Rashbam's problem. It says a Geshmak Rashbam. Let's learn that inside. Is the mukmi lebebari uvaloi dienu, and it's telling us dine mechira ma shayar latzma. Frek der Rashbam v'loy nehirli. I don't think that's pshat, because ma inyin ba yezu bezu hashmua ubezu perek. What in the world is this shaila in someone who's selling when he's being meshayar himself something? What does that have to do with the shaila of shchivmera that we're discussing here? You know where it belongs? Where Mati says it belongs. Right? That's what Mati is referring to. Referring to that payalif where this was discussed. Therefore, Dr. Rashbam, the shaila must be b'shchiv mera mukminu. This whole shaila must be by case of a shchiv mera. V'masnisin koi, it's actually referring to our Mishnah. The katani b'shchiv mera shayir karka kol shehu matanose matano. We learned in the very last Mishnah that if a shchivmera keeps something for himself, and he did it with a kinyan, and then he becomes healthy, he can't reverse the matana that he gave. So when can a shchivmera reverse the matana that he gave? That's only if he gave everything over and left nothing for himself. So then, as the Gemara said, you have an umdana demuchach, that he only gave that gift because he thought he wouldn't need it anymore. He thought that he wasn't going to live. But had he known that he was going to live, he surely would not have given the matana, and therefore, if he becomes healthy, ein matanos matana, he gets it back. But shayar kaka kol shu, if a shchivmera gave everything away except for a little bit, why is he holding on to that? Obviously, because that's what he wants to keep for himself, and the rest he's willing to give away. So even if he gets better, it's still going to be a matana, the vast majority of his nechasim that he gave away. So once we know such a rule, the boyalahu, now this is the shaila that we're having in our Gemara. Someone said, I want my dekel to go to Reuben. The nimlach, the chazar, the nasan perois of lacher. We know a shchivmara can always undo what he did until the last minute. So he gave everything. He gave everything to Reuben. And then he says, I changed my mind. I want to give the payers to Shimon. Come on. We said, we're going to learn later on. Amar Rab Nachman shchivmara shekosov kol nechosov. A shchivmara who gave away all of his nechosim, but not a one shot, little by little. Shim nimlach, if he says, Reuben, I want you to have this property, and Yankel, you should get that property. Then Meis, Konu Kulon, they're all going to be koina because it's a shivra. If he gave away all his nechosim, even though he gave it away little by little, it's Konu Kulon. But an Amad, if he survives, so then any matna shchivmara comes back to him if he survives, because like we said about the shchivmara, there's an he won't want to give it away if he doesn't survive. If he gave away 10 properties one by one, which Nisina was a Nisina that left nothing over for himself? Only the last one. All the prior Nisinas reserved for himself what he didn't give away. So therefore, if he ends up surviving, the last thing that he gave away was a Matna Shchivmara, and therefore he gets that back. But the prior things that he gave away, where he was Mishayah for himself during those Nisinas, those he doesn't get back. The Lehava Beshir, the last one, he gets back Lehava Beshir. Aval Kamoya, but the earlier Nisinas, the Hava Bahen, Shir, they had a Shir because there were still more assets that he had not yet given away. Kanu. So therefore, that's the Shaila over here. When he gave away the dekel to Reuven, did he mean to retain for himself not only the payers, but the mokim peri, the branches on the tree that will produce those payers? Kishanash on that dekel, l'rishon, below payers, when he gave the dekel to the rishon without the payers, shayir la'atzmai mokim apayers anfeya ilon shaboy gedelon apayers. Did he retain for himself the branches upon which the payers are going to grow? And therefore, even though he gave the sheni to payers, so he gave the main tree to Reuven. He gave the payros only to Shimon. But the branches, which is part of the goof of the tree, he's still retaining for himself. The Elon Hamachober Kakar the Bach sticks in the Elon Hamachober Kakar. This is considered Mechubla Karka. And therefore, Vikari and the Allah, Shaya Karka Hoshu. Kum Dechois, he ended up keeping a little bit for himself. And therefore, Vahava Matanosai Matana, Bain Be'ilon, Bain Be'peiros, and therefore, Vim Amad Einachoizer. So, Zok Rashbam, we're talking about a whole different situation. We're talking about something that's related directly to our Sugya. And that is what is called a shear. We know when a Shchivra keeps something, retains something for himself, that matana will remain even if he recovers and he doesn't die. So what is the case over here? He gave dekel to Reuven, he gave payers to Shimon. Does that mean he's retaining for himself the branches, which we could consider kakakolshu, and therefore even if he gets better, the matana stands? That is what our shaila is. So the Rashbam Mamish made an Iber Kerenish in the Gemara because he's telling us a pshat that at first glance you don't think that's what it's talking about. So let's see the Gemara side with a fresh look based on the Rashbam's pshat. And therefore, even if he survives, the matanos to Reuven and to Shimon will be valid. Zok the Gemara, im timsa loymar, la'acher lo have a shear. And here again, we're going to have a whole other Iber Kerenish in the Gemara. I need a coffee before we do this one. Im timsa loymar, la'acher lo have a shear. La'atmoi and chutz miparosh of mahu. So let's slide in to the Bach, because the Bach is going to explain the Gemara the way the Rashbam explains the Gemara. So the Bach changes the Girsa, which is really to confer to work with the way the Rashbam will try in the Gemara. So I'm going to go back into the Bach if I could see it, and so let's see what we have over here. Should get it to focus so I can see it. For Rashbam Geiris, Deka la'echadu peroisav la'acher mau. Im timtza loimer la'acher loy hava shir. If you're going to tell me that when he is giving the pears to an acher, that's not called a shir, and therefore he's retaining nothing for himself, and therefore the matana will be the matana will not be a valid matana if he becomes healthy, because that's how the Rishbam says the shaila is about. Chutz mi peroisav mahu. What if he said chutz mi peroisav? So right away you see a change in the Gemara, because the Gemara says imtim shaloimer la'achal b'shir la'atzmoi chutz mi peroisav mahu. He's taking out the word ma'atzmoi la'atzmoi. He's just saying chutz mi peroisav. Amar Rava Amar Rab Nachman. So Rav Amar Rab Nachman wants to answer the shaila. Im tim shaloimer dekal echad uperoisav la'acher. Loy shire makamperi. If you're going to say in our original shaila, the Bailam did not retain for himself to makamperi, and therefore to matan shemira, that will be reversed if he survives. What if he said chutz mi peroisav? He said, I'm giving Ruvain the tree chutz mi peroisav, and I'm giving Shimon the pears. There, maybe since he spoke an extra word, shire makamperi, maybe there he is retaining for himself the makamperi. Va'aliba de Rab Zvid, there's a whole nusach over here that there's no zeicher of it in the Gemara. So the Bach is putting a whole new nusach into the Gemara that we don't have, and I'll tell you why this is happening. Va'aliba de Rab Zvid, the Amar shimratza lahaitzi bazizin moitzi. The halacha is, if I sell a house, automatically the roof, if there's a mica around it, I'm entitled to keep the roof. We learned that way at the beginning of the Masech. However, if I speak out, chutz from the Yutel Yoina, except for the top row of bricks, then not only do I get the roof, I also get to build a porch. I get to put beams to stick out of the top row of bricks, which will of course be hovering over the property that I sold around it, and I have a right to that airspace because I spoke out the extra nusach of chutz midiyuto hel yoin. So therefore, Rab Zvid will tell us, and this will be on Amud Beis. I leave Rab Zvid Amar Shem Ratza Loitzi Bazizin Moitzi Almo Yosy Kiven the Diyuta Shire. Once he spoke out that he wants to keep the Diyuta, even though anyway the owner would have retained that without saying anything. Mokai Mizizin Nami Shire. He obviously meant to include for himself more than would have automatically been included when he spoke out to Utah, because he used an extra word. He must also want the air rights to be able to build over what is now his neighbor's property. Hachanami, even the Amar Chutz mi Peiraisa, he still is not planning to keep the pears for himself. We're talking about where he's giving everything away. But since he used an extra lotion of Chutz mi Peiraisa, maybe Makam Peirai Shire, he did keep for himself the Makam pears. So what's very obvious from how we learned the Bach is that the Bach and the Rishbam are going through great lengths to discuss a case where I used the Lashon Chutz Meperoisav not to retain it for myself, but it's only going to the second person anyway. I just used an extra nusach of Chutz Meperoisav. But the Pashto way to read it without the Rishbam would be Chutz Meperoisav, where he kept it for himself, right? So why couldn't the Rishbam learn Pashto in the Gemara? And the answer for that is, will come up in a second. So, Amar Rav Amar Nachman Im Tzaloimer Dekalecha the Pereish of Lacher Loy Bashir Makim Peri Loy Bashir Makim Peri Dekalecha the Shire Pereish of the fun of Shire Makim Peri. Again, this girsa was changed. The way you read the Gemara, it almost sounds like what he's retaining for himself. And not only that, the Gemara concludes according to Rav Amar Nachman. You know why? If I was Shire Pereish for myself, I get it. My time at Kol Lagabe Nafshei Ben Yavim Shire. The svar is, if I'm giving part to Shimon and part to Reuven, so there I might not be holding anything back because I'm not keeping anything anyway. But if Seretzach Famir, if I'm talking about what I want to retain for myself, surely I'm retaining for myself. The Rashbam rejects completely the possibility that the discussion could be where he withheld it for himself. He only wants to discuss a shaila where he's withholding it for somebody else, and the reason why Rav Nachman said it's considered withheld is because he used an extra nusach. So the question is why. The answer is going to be in a second. because of what happens afterward. Amalei Rab Abel Rabashi, you quoted Rav Amar Rab Nachman as responding to a shaila that we asked here in Maseches Bava Basra about Dekol Echad U'Preis of Lacher. But we actually heard Rav Amar Rab Nachman said his comment Lagabe a completely different shaila. And there was another shaila that came up by Rab Shlok. So Zog to Gemara, Amalei Rab Abel Rabashi Anan Ad Rab Shimon ben Lakish Masninu. We quoted Rab Nachman's halacha in the name of Rava that he was talking about a completely separate shaila. The Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish, Hamoicher Bayis Lechaveiroi. If someone sells a house to his friend, and he spoke out, Al Manashe the Yutahel Yoina Shali. I want to retain for myself the upper row of bricks, which we already said he gets to keep anyway if there's a mic on the roof. The Yutahel Yoina Shali. That's what Rish Lakish said. And then on that we had a shaila. Ibayalahu Bayis Le'echad the Yuta La'achar. What if the bias was going to one party and the Yuta to another party? Mahu Miyav Ashir Eloi. And here is where Rav Amar Rab Nachman jumped in. So, Frekt the Rashbam, if you're going to tell me that Rav Amar Rab Nachman was making a distinction between if you're giving away the second part or if you're retaining it for yourself, am I giving away the Mokam HaPeres or am I retaining the Mokam HaPeres for myself? That can't be the Shaila on Rish Lakish, because that's exactly what Rish Lakish was talking about. Rish Lakish is talking about where you're retaining the Yutal Yon Shali. So how could you learn that Rav Amar Rab Nachman's shaila is about retaining it for yourself, and that shaila applies to Rish Lakish? Rish Lakish has beferish. If you held it for yourself, you tell Yosy Shalai. So therefore, the Rashbam was forced to say that Rav Amar Rab Nachman can't be discussing merely a case where I'm retaining part for myself, and that's why it should make a chiluk because I'm retaining it for myself. Because then you cannot say the shaila is on Rish Lakish, because that's what Rish Lakish said mefurish. You are keeping for yourself. So therefore, the shaila must be that I'm still giving away everything, but I used a lotion of chutz.
The same as the Mokum Peiros.
That's what the Gemara wants to say now. That's exactly what the Gemara wants to compare it to. And the comparison is only because he used an extra word that he didn't. He didn't need to say chutz midiyut el yoina, because if you sell a bias and you keep the aliyah, anyway you get the diyut el yoina. So it's only because an extra word was used, which is the Reb Zera that the Bach was referring to that we're about to see on Amud Beis.
Because at Peiros it's not like.
What do you mean?
Tree, you're giving, if you wouldn't have said chutz Peiros.
That's right. That's correct. But no, he didn't have to chutz Peiros, because if I say I want the tree to go to Reuven and the pears to go to Shimon, I already separated. I don't have to stick in chutz miperoisa, because I'm giving the tree to Reuven and I'm giving the pears to Shimon. It's obvious that it's chutz miperoisa to Reuven because I'm giving it to Shimon. But I stuck in extra words. I'm giving Reuven the tree chutz miperoisa and I'm giving the pears to Shimon. The chutz miperoisa was a redundant expression. In Echanami, that's true, but that doesn't change anything, because here we're talking about a Matnas Chibura where he has the right to change it, right? By a Matnas Bori, you're right, he wouldn't have had the right to change it, so he had to have been keeping the Diyut by default. But Lagabe our Shaila, where the whole Shaila is, when you speak out the word Chutz, does that change anything? Does that mean to show you're trying to retain more than what you would have retained otherwise? So that's why the Rashbam learns that this whole Shaila is not about if you were retaining it for yourself, because that Rish Lakish has beferish. It's retained for yourself. The whole shaila here is if you anyway were going to give it away to somebody else, would be?
The whole thing is by keeping it to yourself, he wants to keep more, right?
You have the svara that our Gemara uses of kol gaben avshei ben yafim mishayir. We're not using that. That's why the Rashbam is goyres, like the Bach sticks in. He's not even using that svara. The Rashbam takes that whole wording out. The reasoning for Rav Nachman Amar Rava was aliba de Rab Zvid shem ratza la'itza b'zizin moitzi alma kiven de diyuta shire makam zizin nami shire hachanami kiven de Amar chutz mi peroisav, since he used an extra expression makam perishire. So literally the Rashbam re-engineers the entire Gemara and cuts out half an amud and puts in his own words. The Rashbam has the authority to do that. We wouldn't try that on our own. But the Rashbam is literally dropping the Gemara, taking out an Amud, and putting in his own wording for that Amud and say, we're not talking about a Shiloh. Since it's for myself, I retain more. Nothing to do with that. That Rish Lakish told us already. Our Shiloh is, even if I'm giving both away, will the Lashon Chutz also carve that out for myself? So Zok to Gemara, there was a nusach to say that Rav Nachman Amar Rava was not responding to our Gemara, rather he was responding to the halacha of Shimon ben Lakish, even though we're talking about Mata Shkivmera and he's talking about a regular matana, but the svara should be the same, that chutz helps. So let's have a look. Bayis le'echad udiyuta le'echad. Now, mi have a shir oiloi. Do we say that since you use the word chutz, if you notice, it says bayis le'echad. I'm sorry, this isn't the case where we said Tam said bayis le'echad udiyuta le'echad. So the Rish Lakish's halacha was bayis le'echad, and I'm keeping the diyuta for myself, and that's not a shayla. That's clear that kol hagab nafshe, he wants to keep those rights. The Gemara wants to know, what if he didn't want to keep any rights for himself? He was just giving away both the bayis to one person, and the diyuta he wasn't going to keep it, he was going to give it to somebody else. Miyav a shir or would that also be a shir? Meaning, do we also say that he's retaining for himself and therefore giving over to the second person the right to build a porch? And Tim Salomer bayis le'echad udiyuta le'echad loy have a shir. What if he said chutz midiyuta, because now he used a redundant lashon? He spoke out extra, not only to say bayis le'echad udiyuta le'echad, said bayis le'echad chutz midiyuta udiyuta le'echad. So that's extra wording. Then it would be perfectly the same case. That's right. So on that, I'm a Rabbi Nachman and Tim Salomer bayis le'echad udiyuta le'echad loy have a shir. But if he's stuck in chutz midiyuta, then have a shir. And Valib de Rab Zvid, finally the Gemara is introducing us to Rab Zvid, who's the whole pivot behind this shaila. The Omar Shimratza Lahaitza Bazizin Moitzi Lagabi. What do I get to keep? Did you tell Yoina anyway? I get to keep it. It's because now I could even build beams sticking out from the top row of bricks and build a porch, a veranda there, build an observation deck. Alma, what do you see from here? Kivan the Shire, the Utah Makam Mizizin Nami Shire. Since he kept the diyuta for himself, he's also retaining for himself the right to build out and expand the rooftop by putting out beams. So that was the shaila that the Gemara applied with. And from Reb Zvid, you see that the extra lashon, in fact, does mean that he's retaining that for himself. So we had two major changes in the Gemara because of the Rishbam. A is we're not speaking about a kinyan. The question is this considered shire kol shehu or not? And B is the discussion in our Gemara is not if you're keeping it for yourself. That's pashut that you keep it for yourself because of the svarvin. Rather, our shaila is if you're keeping nothing for yourself, you're distributing it to two separate parties, but you're using a lashon of chutz. Zok Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yosy bar Minyomi Amar Rab Nachman. Shchivmera shekasav kol nechasav v'lacher. A shchivmera that wrote off all of his nechasim. He's giving everything away. Royin, you look at it like this. Im b'mechalik meis kanu kulon, they're all kind of omad chayzer b'kul. If when he gave it away as the Rashbam says, he wasn't planning to give away all his nechasim. Ella acha shechilak shasak. He gave away one property, and then he said that's enough. And then he said, you know what? I'm going to give away the other property to another guy. If I gave away one property, there would be nothing left to give away. Here's a guy who, the more he gave away, the more there was coming. So there's only a few people that could have the luxury of doing what we call kimachalik. Okay, you can have that building over there. Okay, that's it, enough. You know what? I have another building over there. You can have that one. And little by little, he's giving away one building at a time. But in each building that he's giving away, he wasn't giving away all of his nachas. Okay, so then the halacha is, if it was b'machalik, meis kana kulon, but amad chayzer b'kulon, oh, I'm completely wrong. I'm I'm very sorry. But Lamaisa, he gave away everything. So let me look at the I read Nimlach. I read the Rashbam on Nimlach when we were talking about Machalik. So we got to go with Machalik. I apologize. In Machalik, Shemishar Rishayna Shehischel Lachalik, Haya B'daita Lachalik Kol Nechazav, V'layla Sharklo. If as he's listing off, everyone's getting their chalik, he had a list and he was going to be distributing all of his assets, then Meis Kanu Kulon. That's a classic case of a Shchivim Rabbi Machalik as Nechazav. But Amad, if he survives and he's healthy, Chayzer Bekulan, because it was clear he only gave everything away because he's dying. But in Benimlach is the one that I'm talking about, that he gives one building away at a time. There, Meis Kanu Kulan, if he dies, they're Al Qaeda. But Amad, but if he ends up surviving, Einay Chayzer El Ba'achran, because every single gift that he gave away, he still retained for himself a building. It's only the last building that he gave away that he didn't retain anything for himself. So that's the only thing that has a status of a matna shchivra, that if he becomes healthy and he recovers, that matana will be bottled. But the other ones were real matanas. Why do you say that? Maybe you say, even though he was giving it away little by little, his das was to give it all away. But as he's giving it away, he's thinking it over what to give to who, and therefore there's a pause. But Avada's intention from the beginning was to give everything away. In other words, he didn't have it all figured out, but he knew he was giving everything away, and at the spur of the moment, he was going to decide who gets what. He wasn't so calculated. So that's not how Shchiv Meras work. Started the Shchiv Mera made it daik v'hoda yoiv. A Shchiv Mera gets it all figured out with clarity before he opens his mouth, and then he gives it away. That's how Shchiv Meras work. We should never know how that feels. But a Shchiv Mera doesn't think along the way back and forth. He has his mind made up as to who's getting what, and then he gives it away in one shot. The fact that he's pausing between each Nesina shows that it's not really a Matna Shchiv. Amar Bacha Bar Menyumi Amar Rab Nachman. Shchiv Mera shekosav kol nechosav lacher. A Shchiv Mera that wrote away all of his nechosim. The Amad, and then he became healthy. Einay Chayzer. Now this is exactly the opposite of what we learned until now. We learned Shchiv Mera gives everything away. If he becomes healthy, Abadi is Chayzer and everything. But Zogt, Rab Acha Bar Menyumi and Rab Nachman, no, he can't be Chayzer. You know why? Maybe he has other properties. Maybe he didn't give everything away. Maybe he has something else. How does that shim with our Mishnah? How do you have a case? If you're telling me by default we assume he has a property somewhere else, and therefore nothing qualifies as a matna shkivmera, and therefore he cannot be chayzer, how does it stem with what our Mishnah says? You know what happens? You know when you say that he gets it back? If he doesn't just say you get this property and you get that property. He said, Reuben, you get all my properties. So he made it clear that he's given everything away. Because there, no matter what he has, he's given it away. That's when a matna shchivmera gets divorced. I'm sorry, I'm confused. That's when he gets it back. I apologize. That's when he gets it back. The reason why I got confused is because I was thinking of something else while I was talking, and that is there's other gesois in the Rishonim who learn that even if you didn't say, I'm giving away all my nechasim, there's still a way for the matna shchiver to be bought to become healthy, and that is if you give away property by property, and then you say, by the way, that was all of my nechasim. So you didn't say I'm giving away all my nechasim. I give away this property, that by that property, and then you said, by the way, that was all my nechasim. That's how some Rishonim learn. But Omer kol nechasai. When he said these are all my nechasim, the ones that I have already listed. So there you assume that he didn't have anything else, and therefore if he survives, he gets all those back. Mar Baravashi Amar b'muchsek lon the last time. Maybe the Mishnah is speaking where we know for a fact he doesn't have nechasim. We know what he has, and we know he has nothing else. So even though he gave away property by property, and he didn't say I'm giving away all my nechasim, but we know that he doesn't have any more than this, that would be enough to say that if he survives and he recovers, he gets everything back. Iboilu. What about chazar b'miktas? Have a chazar b'kula oilai. Because we know that a shchivmera, up until the last moment, could reverse everything that he said until now. He could have given all of his nechasim to Ruvain, and right before he dies, he could change his mind and say, I want to give it to Shimon. So what if he gave everything to Ruvain, and then he says, you know what? One property, out of all the property I gave to Reuven, I want to give to Shimon. So he was chayzer on miktas of the matna shchivmera that he gave to Reuven. Do you say that he's chayzer on everything? That means when he dies, do you say that Reuven still gets everything besides what he gave to Shimon, or do you say Reuven gets nothing? That is the shayla. So chazar b'miktas have a chazar b'kula oilai tashma kula on the risha. The shchivmera said, I want all of my nechasim to go to Reuven, and then umiktasim l'sheni, but I want this property to go to Shimon. So the halach is sheni kana. Shimon will be kana the property that he was gifted by the shchivmera. but the region like kana. The region was not kana. So let's think about it. My love bishames. Let's say it's speaking where the Shchivmera actually died. And even though the Shchivmera actually died, we say that Reuven gets nothing. So you see clear that when he gave the little property to Shimon, he reversed everything that he gave to Reuven. Because that's how Shchivmera works. The last thing that he says is chal. And that's why you have to know what the last thing he said was before he died. Because it's the same svara. If he can't, then he'll that in itself will give him distress. The svara for the Shchivmera is if he can't do what he wants, he's going to have distress, and that can cause him tiruf hadas. It just means you can't kiss up to him and get him to give you everything. You have to continue kissing up to him until the moment he dies.
No, he died.
What?
He died.
No, but the problem is he gave everything to Reuven, and now he took one property away from Reuven and gave it to Shimon. Does that mean he wants to reverse everything he gave to Reuven? They're not Yerusha. Well, they could be Yerusha, but they're probably not. Right? They're discussing if they're getting it as a gift.
Last visitor gets everything.
That's how it is by Akira Shemes. The last visitor gets everything because he'll be zeichen it right away. Okay. Zok to Gemara. So that was a shot. The Tashma. Kulon Rishon the Mitzvah Sheni. Sheni Kana Rishon Lakat. My love b'Shemes. And if it's speaking b'Shemes, you have a Klor Raya that Chazer b'Miktas, Chazer b'Kuloi. Zok to Gemara Loi. Maybe it's speaking b'Sha'amad. And if it's b'Sha'amad, then we'll say that the Rishon is Loi Kana because Soif Kol Soif he was Mishayir some. If he was, I'm sorry, we'll say that if he stood up, you don't have a riot that he was chayzer on everything. Maybe he was only chayzer on some, and that's why he gets it. Why is that? Why, if Bisha'amad, do we say he doesn't get it back? He does get it back because he doesn't want to give everything away. So let's have a look. Bisha'amad, loy la'olam loy avachazar u'brayta Bisha'amad. So therefore, sheni kana. The second guy gets his gets to keep what he got. The matana b'miktas le'machadebe. The second guy only got a little piece. A little piece, we say, will work even if he survives because he retained enough for himself. But the first guy who got everything without a shear, therefore, if he becomes healthy, he gets it back because he was going to give everything away. Correct, Mati, that doesn't make sense. Why not?
Same time.
Oh, correct the Gemara. I'm happy you asked. I got you. Look, come on. The respondent is telling us the Gemara soon can ask exactly Mati's kasha. Look, come on, Barchinon. Ibisha Amad, then Tarvayu liknu. Va'afilu sheni. Neither one should be koined. Because at the end of the day, he gave away all of his nechasim. If he gave away all of his nechasim between the two of them, everything should be bottled if he survives. Not only the sheni, right, which is what your kasha is. In the Chanami, that's exactly what the Gemara is going to ask very short. It's mistaver to say that this Bryce is speaking where he was Amad, not when he was Kishames. Midikatani Seifa, the second half of this Bryce has another case. First, he gave Miktas and Larisha. First, he gave one property to Ruvain, and then he told Shimon, and you have everything else. The Chulun Sheni respond touches and everything else. So Rishon Kana, the Rishon will be Kana, Sheni will be Loika. So let's think about this. If it's speaking where he ended up becoming healthy, Mishum Haki Sheni Loikana, that's why the Sheni is not Kana, because when he gave away this to the Sheni, what he gave him, there was nothing left. Elai Amrit Bishames, if you're saying he died, Tavaya Liknu, they should both be Kana, because it's a regular, valid Matash Chivera. Elamai, you have a raya that when he's chayzer from one, when he's chayzer from part, he must have been chayzer from everything, and that's why the rishon is not. I'm sorry, and therefore the rishon is not koina. That's right. So because of the rishon, the chulun l'sheni, rishon kana. If it was rishon kana, because when he gave to the rishon, he left over some. So therefore, even though he's amad, it will be koina. But if it was because when he gave the Rishon, he left over some. If when he gave to the Rishon, he kept some for himself, that means it was a regular valid matana, so it should work whether or not he dies.
If he dies, then the shame should.
Yomot Bishameis. So again, so Bishlam Kishamad, if it's being Bishamad, Misham Haki Sheni Loikana, because the second guy got the final amount, right? El Iyamad Bishameis, if it's speaking where he died, Tavaya looked they should both be kind. But it doesn't say that. So Elamai, it must be speaking Bishamad. So therefore, you have a raya, right? So if it's being Kishamad, then you have I'm sorry, so therefore you don't have a raya. So therefore you don't have a raya.
I'm sorry, we're talking about the
That's right. Right. And therefore you don't have a raya that Chazar b'mitzasei Chazar b'kul. Zok to Gemara, Amar B'yemer Labashi, and this is Moti's Kash. V'tahava nami b'shah. So let's say the Bryce is speaking where this person ended up surviving. If you would agree to me that Chazar b'miktas is a Chazar b'kula, I knew that will explain the Sheni miyas kana. That would explain why in the Reisha the Sheni was kana. Chazar b'miktas lo have a Chazar b'kula. But if the old Chazar b'miktas is not a Chazar b'kula, then nahava kemechalik. It should have a din of giving it away little by little. Ulachad minay loy likni. No one should get. No one should get because you give everything away, which was exactly what Moshe's Kasha was. In other words, you can't suck and blow at the same time, right? So therefore, the Hilchazah, so therefore you end up having a raya that Chazar b'miktas have a Chazar b'kula. The Hilchazah Chazar b'miktas have a Chazar b'kula. And therefore, once we have that halacha, let's analyze the brisa that we just discussed. Reisha, when he gave Reuven and the Chosim to Ruvain and then one small piece to Shimon, Reisha mishkachas lei bein shemeis bein she'amad. It doesn't make a difference if he died or if he didn't die. Regardless, the first matana is bottle, and that's why only the sheni gets and the rishon doesn't. Because when he gave to the sheni, he was mevatel everything that he gave to the rishon. And seifa le mishkachas la, the seifa says the rishon is kana, the sheni is loy kana. There it's le mishkachas la b'sha'amad. Because if he died, everyone should get what he gave to them. But if it's kish'amad, then it's the rishon kana and the sheni is loy kana. Because once he stands up, the rishon was not a matnash chivmara because he was shayar la'atzmai, and the second person was a matnash. Okay, iboilu. What if he didn't give it away to a person? Rather, he was makdish it. Maybe that's stronger. Hikdish kol nechasa of amad mahu. Miamrin, and do you say kol agabi hekdish gamaru makni? Even though he's going to survive, but he's giving it to hekdish, he wouldn't have taken it back. A chivmara wants it back if he gave a gift, but maybe if he gave it to hekdish, he wouldn't want it back. Dilma, when it comes to hektish, still kol gabel shai legomar umak. Yes, hektish is very choshev, but not if it's a matter of him surviving. Right. But the question is, did he mean to give it to him even if he survives?
No, the point is no.
Well, so the Gemara has a shayla. So Dr. Gemara, what about a hifker kol nachas? If it was mafker all of his nachas, mi amrina, do you say keeping the af laniyim kiashirim? He's giving it to everybody. So therefore, Komar Humakni, he means to give it away in Gantan, even if he survives. Again, Loy Gamar Umak. What about Chile Kol Chazav Lanim? He gave it all the way to poor people. Do you say, Miamrinan, he did it when he wanted to do Tzedakah Tatzal Mimovis. So if it's only a Matana, if he dies, it can't be Tatzal Mimovis. If you want to use it as a Tatzal Mimovis, he has to give it away regardless. Miamrinan Tzedakah Vade Migma Gamar Umakni. Take you, the Gemara bribes to take you. Let's just learn the last line. What are Lashonis that he could say or write that would be valid to actually give these properties away? He could use the Lashon of Yitoil, Ploni should take this property, or Ploni Yiske, or V'yachsik, or V'yikne. Any one of these four Lashonis are a good Lashon Esina, Kulan, Lashon Matanahim. But Masnisa Tana, we also learned Af Yachsin V'yirish, which are two different Lashonis of Yerusha. Those will also work if the person he's giving it to is Baroy Liyarsha. So if he's giving it to one of his children, but he wants him to have a bigger chelik, he can use those Lashonis. But he wouldn't be able to use those Lashonis if he was giving it away to a third party. How would that work? Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereikahi. If you remember, Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereikahi was the one who said that you can give a matana, you can reallot and give more to one child over another child if it's royally yarshai, and it will be chal b'tor shirusha. Iboilu. What if he didn't use any of these lashonis? Rather, he used the lashon of yehena bahen. I want Pliny to have hana from it. Maybe what does it mean have hana? It should be his. Mao. Do you say didn't have a kula about matana kamer? Does it mean you should have enough from it because it's all his? Idilma, he's just saying less hani minayu. Midi kamer. You just have a little bit of enough from it, which of course is not valid. You can't just give someone enough. You have to give him a chelik of the property. How about yira bahen mahu, yamoid behen mahu, yishan ben mahu? What's the halacha with all these two cases? Okay, we'll stop here and the namshach tomorrow. Today was a confusing day because of the Rashbam changing Pshat of the Gemara twice. It took me a long time to wrap my head around it. And then Tosfos argues with the Rashbam.
Very good. I like this method.
That's all Akiva Bolter. Also, wir können kein Kamel geben a Frasch, weil Kind, weil